Kirby Smart sounds really confident as the Georgia Bulldogs are breaking camp this year, heading into the 2024 season. Now, a lot can change in just 1 week, and I think that's what we saw during full camp here for the Bulldogs. The thing about fall camp is, to Kirby Smart, it literally means everything. The team that you're going to have, how they come together, whether or not they are going to be a championship unit. All of those things are formed during the crucible that is fall camp in the summer heat here in Georgia. That's what we're going to talk about on this episode of How About That DawgsCast. And I got to tell you, friends, if I had sat here and was going to do this show a week ago, it would sound completely different. But now, instead of just one scrimmage and one appearance at a press conference, we have two. The Dogs went through their second scrimmage this past Saturday, and when Kirby stepped to the podium earlier this week, his tone had completely changed, and he offered us a lot of things that we can take forward with us as we head into the season. I think the best place to start is the fact that between scrimmage 1 and scrimmage 2, you generally are going to have a huge jump. And that's what we saw. When the Dogs went out for scrimmage 1, it had been 6 months, 5 months since spring practice. And that was their first exposure, full go in full pads, since G-Day. I understand that they had been going through practice, summer workouts, lifting, that they had had a few fall camp practices at that point. But most of that first week had been acclimating to the heat, right? First you're in just shorts and t-shirts, and then you're in shorts and shells, and then you start to put on the full gear. And you ramp up to that first appearance. And when the Dogs went out there, well, let's just say it looked like they hadn't played real football in about 5 months. The word coming out of that first scrimmage was that Kirby wasn't very practical, or he wasn't very happy with the way practice had gone, the way the scrimmage had gone, that they felt the heat, that they seemed mentally weak, that that tackling was sloppy. It's easy for me to say. That the offense was out of sync, that all the defensive backs wanted to do was grab and hold. They didn't want to cover anybody. That the quarterbacks were less than careful with the football. But that's why you practice. And after that first scrimmage, I came on here and I made a video and said, Kirby wants everybody to know how ugly that was. He wants everybody to know, including his players. Now, I don't know, I can't prove that Kirby was trying to reach out to his players through the media, but it wouldn't be the first time that a head coach has done that. It wouldn't be the first time that Kirby Smart has done that. And even though there was no press allowed into those scrimmages, word gets out, boosters, contacts, sources, all that stuff. He knew that word was going to get out that that was a less than stellar effort. And he did that on purpose because he wanted everybody to know that he wasn't the only one that knew how it went down. He wanted it out there, that people like me were going to hear about it and talk about it and start to question, does this team have what we think they have? Just a subtle way to put a little pressure on the team. And then what happens when they step back out there for scrimmage 2? When we hear from Kirby, we discover that the effort level, the energy, I think is the way he put it, was much better. The heat, not such a problem. People were pushing through it. He even went so far as to answer that point that I made directly from the podium on Tuesday when he said, I know that they are mentally tough. That tells you that he saw what he wanted to see from scrimmage 1 to scrimmage 2 from his team. And that's important because, as we had talked about leading into fall camp, people like Carson Beck and other established leaders on the team were either going to emerge and actually lead the team to be the kind of unit that they wanted to be, or they were going to still flounder, not step up, not take that leadership role, and hopefully somebody else would step up. But after what we heard Kirby say from the podium on Tuesday, I don't think that is a concern. I think most of the things that we thought we knew about this team are who they are. Now, of course, we can't know this. We cannot know exactly what they are until we see them play. Fair. But when you follow it as closely as I do, as we do, if you're in here, if you're listening to this, you're one of the people that are just like me and that you keep your finger on the pulse of the program, then you feel pretty comfortable with understanding what you're looking for, what actually matters, what's fluff, and what actually matters. And I think what we're hearing from Kirby is that from scrimmage 1 to scrimmage 2, the things that mattered were improved upon. The things that we needed to see, we saw. Now notice, this is treetop level stuff. I'm not even talking about individual performances, individual players growing up, stepping into roles, all of that stuff. But all of that happened as well. All of that happened. Guys like Malachi Starks, right? In one of the areas that Georgia is considered to be maybe vulnerable, or at least if you have a question about the Dogs, it might be in the defensive secondary. Well, you've got guys like Malachi Starks. Everybody's All-American heading into the season. He had to lead that group. He, along with Dan Jackson, had to step up and lead that group. He, along with Dalen Everett, veterans in the room, had to lead. And that's what we began to hear after scrimmage 1. When we got to scrimmage 2, we didn't hear those reports of everybody's just grabbing. We heard about guys making plays on the ball. We heard about young players stepping up. One of the things that Kirby said from the podium this week was, and I think it was fairly common knowledge, I think most of us would have been comfortable assuming that there were 4 guys that had been rotating through the cornerback positions. We all assume Dalen Everett has one position locked down, and he has a lot to prove this year on his own for some people. Not for me necessarily, but for others. But everybody thinks we can count on Dalen, and people want to know, well, who's going to start opposite him, and then who are going to back up those 2 guys? So that gets us to 4, and we all sort of knew who that might be, even after David Daniel was let go from the team. So you're looking at Dalen Everett. Everybody seems to think that maybe Julian Humphrey is the other guy, which, just as an aside, that is a player that I cannot wait to watch this year. I think Humphrey is going to be really nice at the corner opposite Everett. In the short time we got to see him last year before he got hurt, he really did show lockdown potential. Ball skills in the hip pocket of the receiver, long and aggressive. I think this could be a big year for Julian Humphrey. But let me move on. If you start to look at the guys behind those 2 dudes, now it's not just the freshman, Ellis Robinson. Now it's not just Daniel Harris. Those were the 4. Now we're starting to hear names roll in there like Chris Peel, Justin Rhett, Ja'Cory Thomas. Comfortably now, instead of 4, we can say that there are 6 guys that are rolling through at the cornerback position and also cross-training at the star position that the Dogs can count on to play winning football. So that area that people wanted to point to and say, this looks like a weakness, this is at least a question mark. According to what Kirby Smart's telling us, maybe it's not such a big question mark. Maybe it's actually a position where the Dogs are going to be able to illustrate that depth and development that we hear about so much. I didn't list all the bodies there. There are more. But it sounds like those 6 are the 6 that we can all be comfortable about if we see them on the field, especially earlier in the season. Now, there are other things going on. There are other questions about this Georgia club that we really need to know, not whether or not they're talented or any of that, but more about who's actually seeing the field, who's getting into the rotation, who's showing up, who can be depended on. And one of the cool things I thought that we heard from Kirby Smart this week after that second scrimmage, after the Dogs broke fall camp, was that the guys that we would expect to hear were doing well, like Dylan Bell, like Dominic Lovett. They were, in fact, doing well. They were making plays. But the thing that came from this last appearance before the media was that, and it was a question that had been asked the entire offseason, how are you going to use all of these guys that are going to be able to line up as pass catchers for you? Are they going to have, you're going to have your top 3 and then they're just going to get the bulk of the catches? How does the depth look? Are you in trouble depth-wise since you've had to release Ra Thomas? Do you have players? And Kirby told us that the big thing that he was working on taking out of this camp was that he knows he has dependable wide receivers that can play. We know that there are 4, 5 that they trust and they can put on the field no problem. But one of the points of emphasis for the coaching staff during camp was to not give those 4 or 5 all of the repetitions. They wanted to bring in some of these younger guys, the transfers, Colby Young, to be one example. Get them on the field, and yeah, you might sacrifice a little continuity there between Carson and his number 1 or number 2 or whatever you want to think of it as. But you're building depth, because the question that had been asked all offseason was, how will Kirby Smart and other coaches across the country handle playing a longer season, assuming that you're going to play 15, 16, 17 games? Everybody wants to think they're going to make it to the end. And if that's the case, then that's your reality. You're going to play more games. Well, if that happens, wear and tear happens. You have to have quality depth. What does quality depth mean? It means winning football for Georgia. That's how they phrase it. Can we trust you to play winning football? So during the second week especially, it had been ongoing, I'm sure, but during the second week especially, Kirby wanted to let us know that they were rotating through more bodies at the wide receiver position to work on that depth so that they don't end up in a position like they were in last year, where when Lab McConkey goes down, and oh, by the way, Brock Bowers is hampered, who do we trust to catch the ball for us? You might have questions there. They don't want to find themselves in that position again. They don't want to be like Alabama. They lose a receiver or 2. Now nobody trusts anybody out wide. They don't want to be like Ohio State. You lose a receiver or 2, and now all of a sudden you don't have anybody that you trust to make a play for you. They don't want to be there. So at the wide receiver position and everywhere else, I'm sure, but because it's such of a marquee position, Kirby just wanted to let us know we're working on our depth. We're trying to build out this room and make sure that everybody can help us if we need them to over the course of the season. And the thing that we need to remember here throughout all of this is that for Kirby and this group of players, it's about progress over perfection. That's what camp is for. You look at a guy like Smile Munden, and he has been hampered, or at least not full go, by soft tissue injuries and other slight nagging things that have been bothering him. Yet he has been able to make progress both as a leader in his room, as a leader on the defense, and in preparation for the season by doing what he could as he could, because they're trying to get everybody healthy. And that brings us to a bigger point here, which is that just days away from the open of the 2024 season, The Georgia Bulldogs are about as healthy as you could possibly be to begin a year. Now, recently I posted a video where I was lamenting the fact that Georgia had some injuries along the offensive line at center. That one appears to have worked itself out. It looks like the Dogs are going to have the offensive line unit that they want to start the season. That is a really good thing. Talking about continuity, if I had to choose between whether or not I was going to have continuity between Carson Beck and any receiver, pick one, or I can have continuity along the offensive line, give me the continuity across the offensive line every day of the week. Especially when you look at this Georgia team and how everybody thinks they're going to go this year, it's going to be based on what that hopefully dominant offensive line can do. So yes, the fact that Jared Wilson's actually going to be okay from his Achilles strain, and he's going to be ready to go, knocking on wood, that is really good news. Again, progress over perfection. Showing up, being available every day, you are going to make progress. The same thing was said along the interior defensive line. Injuries. There's one player that's not going to be ready for the first game. Jordan Hall. He could miss 3-4 weeks. But he's going to come back. His journey is different. So he needs to continue to make progress to get back and be ready when he's able. But that defensive line as a whole has had to take advantage of the opportunity because Jordan's out to get younger guys in there, get them repetitions against this really good offensive line so they too can continue to progress. No one is going to be perfect in scrimmage 1 or scrimmage 2 of fall camp, but they are working to get better every day. And that speaks to something that I've heard people bandy around during this fall camp. And that is, it's been reported in a couple of different places, a couple of different quotes have come out, and you know, it offers a little insight. Because as a fan, especially a fan of a winning program, you want to think that your program is the best. Nothing wrong with that. It's called being a fan. Now, you can be delusional about it, but let's put those things aside. Let's just say you're being a fan. You want to think that your team is the best. But what we heard coming out of camp this year, and you hear more of it because of the transfer portal, veteran Georgia Bulldog players, established starters, have gone on record and said they have been talking to friends that have gone to other schools. They've transferred out, or maybe they signed with another school and these guys still keep in contact with them. And they have, when fall camp rolls around, the bottom line is fall camp is hard for everybody everywhere, period. But during fall camp, the Dogs, because of the way they do it, are essentially on lockdown. They don't get to stay at home. They don't have their car keys. They don't have the ability to go home to mama. They are staying at the hotel about 100, 150 yards away from the practice facility. So they walk to the hotel every day when practice is over, and then they walk back to the football facility, spend all day, 10:30 at night, they finish their day, and then they go back to the hotel. It's literally camp for the Georgia Bulldogs. Hearing some of these veteran Dogs talk about when they reach out to other players at other places and they're like, man, how are y'all doing it? Are you making it through the grind of camp? They are reporting back publicly that these players at other places are saying, man, it is nothing like what you are doing. Georgia does it different. I paused for effect there. Because again, if you are a fan of a program that is a top tier program, pick one in the top 5, top 8, top 10. When I say that, you're going to say, yeah, but we do that too. I'm telling you that it is leaked out, reported, however you want to phrase it. That is not the case. It is not the way Georgia does it everywhere else. The way Georgia does it is different. Now, does that guarantee that they're going to win X number of games or a national title this year? No. But these things are not the same. Everything that has come out has been that the way Georgia does fall camp is different. It's harder. It's more intense. It's more like the military. Not my words, the players' words. It is regimented. There is no freedom. You don't get in your car at 6 and go home and hang out and then drive back to the facility. No. It's not how it goes at Georgia. To further strengthen that point, players that have transferred into Athens, into the program from other places like Oregon. A lot of people seem to think Oregon's going to be a national title contender this year. Colin Gill transferred in to Georgia. Why? Why would he leave Oregon and come to Georgia? Because he said, I want to be developed in a way that I cannot be developed anywhere else in the country. That's not me as a happy fan bragging to you about how good Georgia's DBs are. No. Look at who's on the coaching staff. Look at the track record. It's literally like a coach's convention when you sit in a defensive meeting room with the Bulldogs right now, and especially in the defensive backs room. Colin Gill knew that. That's why he wanted to transfer in. And he has he's under no illusions that he was going to come in and start or any of that. But he wanted to come in and learn the Georgia way. He wanted to come in and compete against the very best because that's what he wants to be. And good on the young man for doing that. But when they asked him, when they were getting to know him during camp, these other players were referring to a direct conversation with Colin Gill, who had come from Oregon, a national title contender this year. They were like, Colin, man, did y'all do it like this at Oregon? No. Laughably no. He's like, man, this is nothing like what we do. It's not even close. I say all that just to say that Georgia is different. I say all that to say that development is real at Georgia. Attention to detail is real. I say all that to say that when you have a guy like is on the screen right now, Janelle Aguero, why did he turn down millions of dollars, literally, his words, to come to Athens and play defensive back? That development and growth and the toughness that is involved in the process, because it is not for everybody. I know other people seem to think that is just something that gets said about the Georgia program. These young men are telling us it's not just words. It's not just a mantra. It is a fact. So we shouldn't be surprised if the Dogs come out and they have a certain edge about them or they're doing it a certain way. I mean, Michael Williams, for example, even in the recruiting game, as players or high school prospects come on campus for the prospective pitch, Michael might be, their partner for the weekend or whatever. And he's telling them, he's like, hey, man, I know you're the stuff. I know you're a 5-star player. But here's the thing. You, whether they need to or not, you personally need to give Georgia a discount simply because of what they are, what this program is. What you're going to get here, you're not going to get anywhere else. And they're not just blowing smoke. I just tried to lay out for you time and again. Players. They're all saying the same thing. What Georgia's doing is not the same, and it is not for everybody. And I think when you're in a culture like that, you start to think about the game differently. Because again, camp is hard for everybody. Like, they make it harder at Georgia on purpose. Player after player says, man, my freshman year, I'm like, bro, this isn't for me. I don't think I can make it. Dominic Lovett transferred in last year. His first year, not even a freshman, his first year in the program, he's like, I didn't know. It was really hard. I didn't know if I was going to make it. All-Americans like Malachi Starks. Brutal as a freshman. Then once you've been there for a minute, it's not that it gets easier. It's that you understand what it takes. You understand what is being asked of you. You see the payoff and what it can lead to. And once you get your head around it, then it's not something that is threatening to break you. It's something you accept and buy into and believe in, which is what Michael's talking about. It builds on itself. And it changes the way you think about the game. Just this week, Dom Lovett stepped to the podium and said, and I'm paraphrasing, something to the effect of, you get to a point where you have to lean on your brothers. And Malachi Stark says something very similar. You get to a point where you have to lean on your brothers so much during camp that you won't get through it if you don't. It's that difficult. So you bond and you build these relationships and you lean on each other and you laugh and you have a good time. But you stop thinking so much about whatever it is that you are trying to achieve, and you start to think about what is the team going to do? And you pay attention to what you have on the roster, and you're like, man, we're pretty good. Or maybe you realize we're not up to snuff today. We're not bringing the energy the way we need to. And then you feel comfortable holding your teammate accountable. And that is how you level up your game during camp. That's how you bond. That's how you grow. That is what I meant when I said that championship teams are formed in the crucible that is fall camp at the University of Georgia. And these guys get it. And here's the other fun part about this entire discussion. And this is a little bit more on the periphery of it all. This is a point where if you take everything that I just said and you believe in it and you buy into the reports, because the guys are saying it with their own voices, not me, they're saying it. If you believe them, then it changes how we as fans look at what we're hearing and seeing coming out of camp. Because we're not even worried about, is this person going to start over this person? Is Monroe Freeland going to start over Xavier Truss? It doesn't matter. Because the goal is the same. And all of these guys are top tier players. And once you get over that fact of, am I going to start, am I not? More like what's best for the team. Look at Tate Ratledge. We all know he took up snaps at center this year, a position he had never played before. Why? Team me. Yes, he's adding value to his own draft stock in the future, but right now, what's important is how can we get through camp and through this first game until Jared comes back? Let's take an All-American from one position and put him at center. Think about what it takes to do that when you've never played the position before. To readily step in there and be like, yeah, I want to do that because I want us to have the best five on the field possible. So when we start to hear about these things, it's not so much that so-and-so is beating out another player. We all want them all to do great. But it's about those finer points. It's about sharpening the edge. It's about progress over perfection. Think about your own life. When you do something over and over and over, something you enjoy, the more you do it, the more confident you become. And in sports, sometimes you fall into the trap of thinking that confidence is literally everything. And in a lot of cases, it is. But there's more to it than that. You can also have a false confidence. That's what we call ego, right? The ego is the loud voice. The ego is the player, the team that is telling everybody how good they're going to be. Well, when we listen to what's coming out of the camp in Athens, what we hear is the opposite. Nobody wants to talk about how good they are. Nobody wants to talk about anything other than the fact that they're all trying to get better every day. That's what they choose to talk about when given the opportunity to be behind a microphone and answer a question directly. These young men are not saying, man, I am rocking it this year and I'm going to get like 6 picks or I'm going to rush for 1,500. No, that's not what they're saying. They're saying this room is awesome. I love playing with these guys. We all bring something different. And we're just stacking days. We're just trying to get better. Dom Lovett today said, I don't really know anything about Clemson. I really don't. He couldn't even think of the Clemson's head coach's name. He said, I hear they're pretty good. I hear they're a pretty good team. That was it. He's like, I respect them, but I don't know anything about them because they haven't looked ahead. That is a big game. Even Kirby Smart said, I actually like having a big game as the first game because it sort of keeps everybody focused. It gets the anticipation up. It keeps everything moving, makes guys want to work harder, all that kind of stuff. He said that. Yet his players say something different. Because even though Kirby's saying that, on the field, in the meeting room, they are focused on one thing, and that's getting better every day. All they're focused on is themselves. This is where I think we have to step back just a little bit, just for a second, and say, that's impressive. It's impressive. And you say, well, it's coach speak, but it's not. When you're tired and you've been drilling on something and you think you can't go anymore, what do we revert to as human beings? Our worst habits. That's why there have to be systems in place to keep us from sinking below the level that we want to, so that we can keep striving to move forward. The thing that Coach Smart and his staff have done is put in place systems at the University of Georgia that prevent their players from falling back to the lowest common denominator, for lack of a better phrase, back to their worst selves, the basal instincts. The goal is we're going to get better every day. So when these kids are at their worst, like broken down and tired and struggling, the thing they hear in their head is, I need to be there for my brother. I need to try to get better just a little bit every day. I can't think about who we're playing because I'm trying to get better today. It just proves that these young men have bought into it. It just proves that the coaches have their ear, that the example is being set and followed. That, as a Georgia fan, should make us super proud. Look at a guy like Damon Wilson, highly touted, 5-star recruit, played last year, but was really kind of a one-trick pony. He was a little light in the seat, but you turn him loose on third down, he could rush the passer, and he was effective last year. Made some plays, caused some havoc, was disruptive, but he didn't know what he was doing. He admits as much. Now, here in year 2, what do we see? We see Damon Wilson, who has put on ample weight to get himself up to the 240, 250 range so that he can take on the best offensive tackles in the conference. He can strike. He can hold the point of attack, maintain his flexibility and speed off the edge as a pass rusher. And how did we get here? How did we get from year 1 to year 2? Development. And understand that Damon Wilson is a little bit different. Damon, a year ago, when you heard him talk, all he talked about was working on his game. He had it right here. Right here, he was very clear. Here's what I'm doing. I have a plan. Year 1, year 2, year 3, hopefully I'm going to go play in the NFL. And he was working toward that every day, talking about how he's like, I don't really know anything about the nightlife in Athens because I don't go out. I hang out in my room. I watch tape, trying to watch how I eat. In year 2, he took all that, stepped it up. So now not only does he have all of the support of the college football or the Georgia football program with his nutrition and his lifting and his coaching on the field to improve his game. He admitted recently that his parents are living with him right now. Sophomore in college, living with his parents. Why? Because he trusts his dad to help him stay on the beam and maintain his focus. Because he's not there to be a partier. He's there to be a pro. And he's working towards it every day. He's taking it seriously. His mother is a backup nutritionist for him. So not only is he being taken care of on campus in the facility, he goes back to his apartment. He's there with his parents. His mother is doing the same kind of thing for him nutritionally as he's getting at the facility. That's buy-in, people. That gives you a confidence that you're not just going to just have because you chose to be confident one day. You wanted to go out and yell at everybody and tell them about how good you are or how good your team's going to be. Damon Wilson is just one of many that are living it, not just talking about it. When they say they are about their craft, that is exactly what we see them living. That should make all of us confident. Along with all the stuff like what you see with the Heisman Trophy favorite and second-year quarterback Carson Beck coming back, that should make us confident. But what should also make us confident is what we saw from scrimmage 1 to scrimmage 2. That leadership. Scrimmage 1 wasn't good enough. We have to be better. Whose voice, whose example do you think the younger players were following if they weren't following Carson Beck? If they weren't following Michael Williams? And speaking of examples, what about the example that Branson Robinson is showing? A year after a really tough injury with a torn patella tendon, Branson Robinson is back, and by all accounts, is hell to deal with. In his own words, again, he's like, I don't have personal goals. I want the team to be successful. We are doing great in the running back room. We all have different talents. But if I know what to expect of myself, I am personally expecting 1,000, 1,200, 1,300, 1,500 yard season. Now, I'm on record as saying I don't think you get that in Georgia's system right now because you just don't get the ball that much. But that just lets you know where his headspace is. The work that it took to overcome that kind of injury, both from a mental perspective as well as from a physical reality, has everyone's attention. And if you are a young back in that room and you're looking at a guy like Branson, who is a top-tier blue-chip recruit, who then had the game taken away from him, and you saw him do all of that work to get back and now climb back to the top of the depth chart in a very deep running back room. That's what it means to be a standard bearer and lead by example. Now, I'm not here to brag on Branson or his family or any of that. Coach Smart did that from the podium, and good on him. Because an effort like this is what any of us as parents would be thrilled to say our child was able to do. I know I would be. Because you come through these struggles, you come through these tribulations, you overcome these obstacles, and it makes you a better person and ultimately a better player. So as fans, we should be confident. But again, none of this happens in a vacuum. In the lockdown bubble that is camp at the University of Georgia, everybody sees this effort. Everybody gets to see this level of dedication. And they're all superstar football players, so they understand it. They know that these guys are taking it seriously. You know, Malachi Stark said as much. He's like, you know who is taking it seriously, who is about it, who has their head on right. You learn that in camp. And then they can call each other out on it, because if a teammate that's in the foxhole with you the way these guys are for this 2 weeks, if they can't come to you and call you out on it and lift you up and encourage you to be better, then nobody can. If you're not going to listen to them, you're certainly not going to listen to a coach. And you're certainly not going to be the kind of guy that's going to contribute on a team full of dudes that are giving it their all. So when players come to each other inside fall camp because they see it first close, they understand the struggle, you listen. Because they all know that feeling of it's hard today, I can't push through. And then they dig down a little bit deeper and they figure out a way to do it. So yeah, there is a confidence, a quiet confidence about Kirby Smart and this Georgia Bulldogs football team as they break camp and get ready to start the 2024 season. And again, confidence is not the same as ego. Ego is loud and false. Ego wants you to look at it rather than the result. Confidence is real. When you are confident, you do not have to talk about it. You show up and you handle your business. Based on what I'm hearing, just my feeling about it, the team that's in Athens right now, grinding away in this fall camp, this team is about that confidence. This team is not about that ego. They could care less about statistics and individual glory. This team is bought in. People throw around buzzwords like brotherhood and you know, part of the family and all of those things all the time in the world of sports. But when you've been around it for a while and you actually pay attention, you begin to be able to tell the difference between a group that's just talking about it and a group that stands on it. I am of the opinion that this University of Georgia team here in 2024 is a group that stands on it. And when you pull that together with everything else that we already know about this team, the talented roster, the returning productivity, the expectations of the new additions, the underpinning philosophy and systems of the program, the superstructure that makes Georgia what it is. When you take this sort of togetherness and you use that to stick everything else together, when things get tough for Georgia this year, and they will with the schedule that they have, that is what's going to make the difference. That team unity is going to be the thing that could separate this Georgia squad from the teams they play later this year. Like I said, Kirby steps to the podium earlier this week and talks about his team in a way that he didn't a week prior. And if I've said anything on this show, you've heard me do it. He says nothing, he does nothing by accident. He is intentional, and everything he says has a purpose. So when he stepped to the podium after scrimmage 2 and had done a complete 180 from what he had said after scrimmage 1, that was on purpose. A little bit of an attaboy for his team. But more than that, he's not going to step up there and talk about this squad in that way unless he truly believes he has a quality football team on his hands heading into 2024. Kirby sounds confident. And the rest of college football, well, that should give them pause. There's been a quiet camp, relatively speaking. That's a good thing. It's a good thing for every reason that I've laid out. It's a good thing on the injury front. It's a good thing because these dogs aren't out there telling us about themselves. They're not telling us how good they're going to be. No, they're focused on actually getting better every day. And when you do that day after day after day, and you combine it with the talent and the superstructure that this program has in place and the leadership of a head coach like Kirby Smart, you have the recipe for what could be that championship team that he's trying so hard to build during the crucible of fall camp in Athens. Kirby Smart has a quiet confidence about him as we head into the season here in 2024. He does nothing if he doesn't do it with purpose. He is intentional in every choice he makes. And when he chose to step to the podium and talk about his team the way he did after the Dogs broke fall camp, well, that should make all of us feel really good heading into the season. This team could be a very special team for the University of Georgia here in 2024. The road ahead is challenging. There is no doubt it is going to be a tough season. But I like the Dogs' chances. Thanks for being here with me. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your friends. Take care of your families. And until next time, go Dogs!
Told them, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.